which New Jersey, the Garden State, is one of the states to say no to bringing in Syrian refugees. Earlier today, I spoke with the governor, Chris Christie, who's also running for the Republican presidential nomination, and I asked Christie why he thinks turning away refugees is the right move. Governor, I wanted to get your response to something said by one of the Republican frontrunners, Donald Trump, who last night on Fox said that he thought that some mosques in the United States, mosques where in his view bad things are happening, need to be shut down. What's your take on that?
Jake, let me tell you, I've done this, okay? As the United States Attorney in New Jersey in the immediate aftermath of September 11th, what we were able to do is to build relationships with some of the mosques to be able to get intelligence. We used the tools that were provided to us by the Patriot Act to gather intelligence, and we actually stopped a raid that was started by self-radicalized Muslims at a mosque in New Jersey that we're going to attack Fort Dix, the Fort Dix 6. We don't need to close mosques. What we need to do is to strengthen our intelligence, roll back the changes that were made to the NSA metadata system, strengthen our intelligence capability around the world so we can gather this information. We don't need to indiscriminately close mosques. What we need to do is to increase our intelligence capability back to where it was post 9/11 so that we can prevent attacks from happening.
Let's talk about this discussion, controversy, dilemma going on about the Syrian refugees. You've said that the United States should not accept any new Syrian refugees, even young orphans. President Obama responded to what you have to say, and some of your fellow candidates. Take a listen.
When candidates say we wouldn't admit 3-year-old orphans, that's political posturing. I cannot think of a more potent recruitment tool for ISIL than some of the rhetoric that's been coming out of here during the course of this debate.
Governor Christie, President Obama saying there not only that you're pandering, but that you and your fellow candidates are potentially hurting national security. I want to give you an opportunity to respond.
Yeah, well, the president's the person who created this entire situation, Jake. He didn't keep his word when he drew a red line in Syria. He allowed this situation in Syria to happen. He hasn't set up a no-fly zone, which could create a safe haven for these refugees to live safely in their own country rather than having to scatter all across the world. And he's the one who's casting aspersions. It's a joke. And he's a joke on this issue. The fact is, we shouldn't be worried about any other folks in this situation without first worrying about the people of the United States of America and their security. And the widows and orphans I remember are the ones after 9/11. And I don't want to create a new generation of those. The fact is the president could fix this problem in Syria if he had acted before. He can help to ameliorate it now, but he is unwilling and unable to be able to do that. His failures have created this crisis, and now he is the one who wants to be a critic. I don't take any criticism from the president seriously. He lives in a fantasy land, Jake, in the way he thinks the world should be, not the way the world is. You're standing in a place where we understand what the reality of the world is, and the president does not.
Of course, as I don't need to tell you, as you just enumerated in describing the need to have good relationships with mosques, fighting terrorism isn't just about short-term solutions. Do you have no concerns at all about some of the rhetoric coming from your fellow candidates in terms of only letting in Christian refugees, about what happens if hundreds of thousands of Syrian refugees are barred from entering countries like the U.S. and they're put in these miserable camps where hatred and extremism, as we know, easily takes root?
Jake, this is fixable if the president would set up a no-fly zone in Syria, set up a safe haven within the country where folks who are in danger can come and be safe inside their own country. There is no need for this refugee crisis. The president created the refugee crisis by his unwillingness to act, by his timidity. And the only time he's not timid is when he's criticizing Republicans. But for the rest of the world, he's timid. And that's what the world sees, and that's why Putin is taking advantage of us, why the mullahs in Iran are taking advantage of us, and why ISIS has grown, according to his own CIA director, exponentially since Barack Obama has been president. His own FBI director, Jake, said there is no way to vet the refugees coming into this country. I believe Jim Comey, not Barack Obama.
I understand that this anti-refugee position is certainly a popular thing to do But most of the terrorists here in France appear to be French and Belgian citizens. And I know that one of them got into this country, one of the terrorists got into this country embedding himself with refugees, but most of them did not. Most of them were citizens here in Europe, and I don't hear you or any of your fellow presidential candidates calling for European citizens to be banned from entering the United States.
Jake, how do you know that most of the terrorists are from Europe? How do you know that? I mean, I'd love to know how you figured that one out. The fact is that the people who perpetrated this attack appear to be mostly from Belgium and France. But for you to make the blanket conclusion from that most of the terrorists are folks who are from inside Europe, just doesn't wash with me. The fact is we need to protect American homeland security first and foremost, and admitting people that the FBI director says cannot be vetted. I don't care where they're from. The FBI director said these Syrians cannot be vetted. And if that's the case, then I would not admit them to this country.
Your Republican rival Jeb Bush, also Ted Cruz, saying that they would give priority to Christian refugees from Syria because they are being slaughtered in the Middle East. Is that something you could support?
What we need to do is to create a safe haven in Syria for these people. We need to create a no-fly zone and a safe haven in Syria, protected by NATO and its allies, so that these folks don't have to leave and aren't under threat from attack from ISIS. That's what we should do.
Governor Chris Christie, presidential candidate, governor of New Jersey, thanks so much for joining us.
Jake, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.